Well, Will, I really appreciate you coming and speaking to me this evening. We're old friends, but as we've just been chatting about, I don't think we've spoken to each other for probably getting on for 10 years.
Yeah, it's touching that.
So, and I think a lot's happened in those 10 years, and you got in touch with me just because you wanted to share your story, really. So let's start off with. So, what was life like for you, Will? As as a child, were you aware of Christ? What was your church involvement?
Sure, yeah. Childhood was good. So neither of my parents went to church regularly. My dad was very much against the idea of going to church, but my mum was brought up in a Christian home and really quite enjoyed going to church on occasions. So we grew up around the corner from an Eden church. So me and my brother went to the kind of the kids club there, went to youth group there, did Sunday school. All those kind of young kids. And as we grew older, my brother kind of drifted away from church, but I was stuck around in the youth group. And I mean, in terms of my understanding of Christianity, it was more of a social thing for me. I'd go along to play my mates at FIFA and have a game of table tennis. And then when it came to the God slot, as they called it in the 90s, I'd just start laughing in the corner and take the mick a little bit, but enjoyed it all the same. Enjoyed the social side, but didn't really pay any attention to the teaching or anything that was going on. And that's kind of throughout school, really. And then right at the end of school, my parents, completely out of the blue, split up. So my dad stayed where we were living, and my mum found a house elsewhere. And that came as a real shock to me, and I started to lean on the church a little bit then. So when I spoke to the youth worker at the church, pretty much straight away, I was given a decision. You either need to come with me now or stay with your dad. I was like, I don't know, man. So I kind of just walked out and went round to the church and had a chat with the youth worker, and then ended up staying with a friend from school for a few days until it was suitable for me and my mum to find somewhere together. So that was kind of my involvement with church really as a kid. And then, so after that point, my mum found a place for us in Brand Hall. And then one Sunday afternoon, I just remember kind of sitting at home a little bit bored. And I was like, there's a church at the end of the road. So I'll pop down there, I'll see what's going on. And I rocked up, and there wasn't a meeting as such in the evening, but there was a few people gathering for like a financial thing, like the
AGM, I think I remember.
No, it was like a little kind of group session about honouring God with your finances.
Oh, okay.
So I was kind of invited in, so I just rocked up, thinking it's going to be a church service. It wasn't, but I was invited in. I didn't want to be rude, so I was like, yeah, all right, I'll come sit in a nice 16-year-old kid, first time ever going to this particular church. And it was so awkward, man. But actually, being welcomed like that made me want to come back, made me want to go to church the next Sunday and get to know what's going on with the youth work there. So quite quickly found myself quite heavily involved in this church. Made at the time what I considered to be a commitment to Christ. And while I was at church, while I was involved in the youth work, or while I was attending on a Sunday or speaking to people who go to church, I was this really good Christian dude. Reached the point where I was quite heavily involved in facilitating the youth work. And actually reached the point where I went to Bible college to study youth and community work and applied theology. And I was all supported by the church, living a Christian life at all. I started drinking quite heavily with lads I went to school with. We'd be having house parties most weekends, and I'll be rocking up to play drums on a Sunday. Incredibly hungover, and just wanted to be going back to sleep. Looking back, it really wasn't. It wasn't much fun at all. But yeah, I kind of kept that facade up that I was this good Christian dude. But really, I was just messing around and just playing.
Do you think that obviously you kind of going to church as a child and doing all the youth clubs and sort of going to church services, you kind of you become familiar with church, don't you? But
yeah.
But at that point, you wouldn't say that you really knew God intimately?
No, not at all. At the time, if anyone asked me at the time, yeah, I'm a committed Christian. But it's the word intimately, I think, and it's knowing God here and knowing God here, and that's the difference. I probably knew more about the Bible then than I do now. Because I had to keep that act up. Whereas now it's much more of a, I know God is real, and I know I'm accepted, and I know I'm forgiven. But we can come on to that. Jumping ahead a few years there. I did. I got really comfortable and got really kind of what's the right word for it? Really lax about things, really. And that became obvious to a few people. So cracks kind of started to show where, let's say, I was meant to be at the church to facilitate a group of school kids coming to visit as part of my placement for my uni course, and I was off at the local motorbike shop doing my CBT because it just wasn't a priority for me. I like to act like it was, but it just wasn't. Faith just wasn't a priority for me. And those cracks just became bigger and bigger, as I ventured out into the world and, made new friends outside of church. I started to realise, actually, this really isn't my number one priority. I want to go out drinking, I want to go out partying. Relationship building is what I want to do. I don't want to just live a quiet life and go to church every Sunday and that's it. Thank you very much. And then, things got worse and worse and worse as time went on. And then midway through 2010, completely out of the blue, my dad died. So I'd just turned 21. It was like 3 weeks after I turned 21. So my relationship with my dad had broken down. And about a week before he died, I got in touch with him and said, look, this is stupid, man. I've just turned 21. You weren't at my party. We need to sort this out. We need to just fix our relationship. So we'd agreed to meet up. And I was putting my shoes on to get ready to go out of the house to go and meet him. A police officer came to the door to tell me that he'd been found dead that morning. And obviously, that hurt. That really sucked. And I see that as a real kind of fork in the road for me. I had an opportunity to really press in with the church and really lean on people who would influence me in a good way, or I had the opportunity to kick back against the church. And at the time, tried to keep up the facade that I was this good Christian boy and I was dealing with everything. But really, I was kicking back against the church and I was blaming God for my dad dying. I was burning relationships all over the place. There was loads of other stuff going on with me where I was trying to live this party lifestyle but wasn't earning the same money as my mates. So I'd steal money from anywhere I could find it, from work, from wherever there was money lying around. If I thought I could get away with it, I'd take it. And that just got worse and worse and become more of a pattern, much more risky, to the point where a lot of people were like, you can't be here. People were saying you can't come to my house. I lost a couple of jobs. it reached the point where I was basically sat down and told, look, either follow Christ or go away, kind of thing. It's the basis of the conversation.
You're asked to make a decision, basically.
Yeah. And I decided to just completely go off the rails. So I moved out. I was staying with a couple in the church. Moved out of theirs on really short notice, owing them rent when I was going, and I was just like, no, I'm done. I'm gone. Inherited a ridiculous amount of money from my dad's estate, and just thought, right, this is my chance to go and live this party lifestyle. You know, I've seen all my mates from school doing it, earning decent salaries. Now it's my turn. And it was great to start with, to be honest with you. I loved it. I loved the freedom of, you know, not having to get up on a Sunday morning. I love the freedom of not having to be accountable to anyone. The freedom to just be able to do what I want when I want. But that very quickly, again, completely spiraled out of control. Most nights, you know, if I wasn't out in a casino, I was out in the pub. It was very rare that I was at home. I'd say 3-4 nights a week I was in a casino. 5-6 nights a week I was using cocaine on a regular basis. Like, it was insane, man. And as quick as the money came in, the money had gone. But I'd made loads of new mates. You know, I was still knocking around with a few people, you know, yourself included, for a short period of time before I completely disappeared off the face of the earth. And bridges just kept burning all over the place. So someone had put me up for a few days or a few weeks, and I'd steal from them because all the money's gone. But I want to keep up this party lifestyle. I went from part-time job to part-time job, like working in bars, working in shops. I'd get caught with my hand in the till and just leg it and just be like, right, cool, I'm done. I'll walk, don't worry. You know, I'd got the experience to go and get another job pretty much anywhere in the same sector, as long as there was a job going. And then as soon as I'd start, I'd have my hand in the till, so that I could carry on this lifestyle. And that whole kind of process played out over about 18 months, until I literally found myself with nowhere to go. So I was living in a professional shared house at the time with other people who were working. I'd managed to blag a room in there for a month. I had the money up front for the rent. So I managed to blag a room in there for a month. And then when the rent was due the next month, I had the money again, but went to the casino with it to try and, you know, double it. And didn't. So ended up having to phone the landlord the next day and just say, look, I can't pay the rent this month. Made up a story about how my work haven't paid me, and, you know, such and such is happening at the moment. Gave him a bit of a sob story, so he gave me another month and said, look, just make it up next month. Don't worry about it, make it up next month. And then the next month went and still didn't have the money, so I ended up being booted out, and found myself living in a pub, kind of above a pub, working in the bar for free. And living on a damp mattress upstairs with like a couple of sets of clothes. All my belongings were at someone's house, so I couldn't face going to the house to get my stuff. Right. Cocaine use had gone through the roof. Gambling, whenever I had money, it was on gambling. You know, I was stealing out the pub, but the owner was never around, so it was an easy win. And then I just remember waking up one morning, and the story of the prodigal son just came into my head, and I was like, this is nuts, man. I can't live like this. I don't know what I'm doing here. And there was a C of E church next door to the pub, so I popped round there, spoke to the vicar, and we had a really good chat. And someone in his congregation had a flat that they were selling over in Dudley, and his flat was empty. And the vicar was like, look, you need to get out of where you're at. You need to just leave a note saying, I'm sorry, I'm gone, and you need to go. This fella says he can stay in your flat. You can stay in his flat. while he sells it. But obviously, if it sells, you need to find somewhere else. And in my head, I was like, great, fresh start. This is amazing. I'm gonna make it work this time.
Yeah.
So I went out to Dudley and found a church out there. I thought, right, I need to give this a go. I really need to have a fresh start here. And I wasn't working at the time, so volunteered my time at the church, setting up for events or helping out in the coffee shop or the bookshop or whatever. And I was determined to make a real go. But then old habits came in quite quickly. And whenever there was money or stuff lying around, I'd have it. Even if that was literally a couple of quid, and I'd go to the bookies and put it on the football or have a crack on the roulette machine. And then there was a family in the church that put me up. And then on my 23rd birthday, so we kind of a couple of years after my dad's died, a few people in this church threw like a surprise birthday party for me. And so I woke up in the morning, the family I was staying with did me a really nice breakfast, got me a couple of birthday presents and stuff. By this point, I'd all but lost touch with my family. So, it's not that they weren't trying to contact me, but I was far too ashamed to have any contact with my family.
Yeah.
So the people I was staying with and a few friends from the church really went all out to make it a special day. But I ended up getting really drunk at this party and saw someone's car keys on a table and just thought, I need some cigarettes. So jumped in their car to go down to Asda. And I got to the bottom of the road and just thought, what am I doing? I haven't even got a license. I can't be driving this car and I'm drunk. So I turned the car around, but on the way back to the house, ended up crashing into someone else's house. Obviously that wasn't the best conversation.
I can imagine, yeah.
I didn't need to knock on the door to explain what was going on. So the owners of the house come out, and I'm there kind of stumbling around, and I'm like, look, it's not my car, and I'm very drunk. Please let me phone the police. And then, to be fair to them, they did. And I stood around and waited for the police. Obviously, was arrested when police arrived and was charged with offences. And obviously ended up in court. And I was pretty sure I was facing prison time. Thankfully, I didn't go to prison. Ended up with a fine. It was £334, including court fees, and then community service, and 18-month driving ban. So, it was really awkward, obviously, going back to the family that had put me up there, 2 young kids, and they really wanted to support me, they really wanted to help me, but I just wasn't letting them. I didn't know how to accept that. So it came to the point where they had to say, look, you really need to find somewhere else. Said in love, but there's nothing we can do for you. So then my old uni got in touch. So when my dad had died, I deferred from university, and the uni got in touch and said, right, if you want to come back, you have to do it this year, otherwise you have to withdraw. So I go back to them and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to come back, because in my head I was thinking, well, this comes with accommodation and it's another fresh start. I could do with another fresh start and I could do with some accommodation. So I got back to them and said, yeah, that's great, but you're going to have to find me a new placement, because I can't go back to the old placement at the church I was at before. And basically I was up front with them, told them everything that had happened, and they were really supportive and really helpful. They found me a placement that started, in a few weeks' time, that came with accommodation, that was, it was all set. And then there was like a few days of a crossover between me having to leave this family's home and getting into the accommodation that came with the placement. So there was a family that I'd known who basically said they kept in touch, and they said, look, you need somewhere to stay for a couple of days. We're going on holiday for a long weekend. Stay at our house. And while I was staying at their house, long story short, there was a laptop under the sofa, and I was short of cash. I was bored. I wanted to go to the pub, so I took this laptop to a pawn shop and pawned it. And the whole time, you know, in the back of my head, I was like, you shouldn't be doing this. This is really stupid, you know. And I had to go quite a distance to get to a pawn shop to pawn it, because there's a charger there's an issue with the charger or something, like it wasn't holding battery, so it had to be plugged in. So I'd phoned round a few places to be like, would you accept this? No. Okay. Phone somewhere else. Would you accept this? No. And it's quite a long bus journey to get to this place that had said they'd accept it. And the whole time, you know, I was just thinking, you really shouldn't be doing this. This is a really, really stupid idea.
But that drive to sort of.
But that drive to get the cash.
Yeah.
Yeah. To go to the pub, to have a little gamble. You know, I just couldn't. I couldn't overcome that. You know, and I was trying to overcome that in my own strength. And you know, we always fall short when we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the family came back, and obviously started asking questions about where the laptop is. So I made up this story about how I broke it. I think I said I'd spilt something on it or cracked the screen or something. And it's in a repair shop, and I'll get in touch with the guy. It's a friend of a friend who's repairing it for me. I still don't know to this day whether they bought it, but they gave me a few days to sort it out, and then started asking more questions. And then we're like, look, it's not in a repair shop, is it? But like an idiot, I kept that story going as long as I could. And I've moved into this placement, moved into the new accommodation. And then the family got in touch with someone who knew the guy who runs the placement. So the guy who runs the placement then calls me into his office and he's like, what's all this about a laptop? And I was like, oh, man. And as I was trying to think of a story, it was just like, you nicked it and sold it, didn't you? I just couldn't even pretend anymore.
You got found out.
Yeah. So I was just like, do you know what? Yeah, I did. And it's like, well, you need to get it back. But also, you know, I've put you in a house with two other guys. I don't really know you. They don't know you. All I know about you is you nick cars and you nick computers. Right? I can't put you in a house with these guys. I can't give you a placement. You're going to be working with vulnerable people. This ain't going to happen. And he basically said, you need to leave. You need to leave today. So at that point, I literally had nowhere to turn. There was someone I knew I could talk to, but couldn't stay with. And that's someone who'd been through the homeless system himself. So I went and had a chat with him. And he said, right, you need to get yourself into town. You need to get to the Sally Army Homeless Services. If they can't help you, they'll be able to tell you where to go. So I did. Walked into town, and yeah, and that's where my homelessness started. Really, nowhere else to turn at all. No idea what I was doing. I ended up spending like a couple of nights on the street before actually getting into the cellar. That's my own fault for dragging my feet to go in there. I was scared, I was ashamed, I just didn't know what I was doing. But when I rocked up there, I managed to get accommodation from them, along with support, and I just thought, right, here's another fresh start. But I just thought, I need to make this work, man. I need to make this happen. Like, I've gone too far now.
That was the point. Would you say that's the point where you hit the bottom?
Yeah, definitely.
You
Sitting in a room
Yeah.
with a dude I've never met before,
Yeah.
asking me about the most intimate parts of my life, and me just being, and I just found myself talking where I'd usually kind of bottle up and make something up and make myself look good. I found myself just talking to this guy and just being like, do you know what? I'm just going to give it you how it is, because if you can't help me, no one can. So
Yeah.
I might as well just come clean.
It's like it took losing everything to sort of, for that facade to completely drop.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, you know, I often say, I look at where I'm at now and where I was a decade ago, and I just think the only thing I'd change is not only who got hurt along the way, but the amount of people, or not really the amount of people, but who those people were. You know, the rest of it, actually, I wouldn't change that much because of where God's brought me to now.
Yeah.
But absolutely, man, I had to hit that rock bottom to really understand that I can't do life on my own. You know, I can't do things through my own strength.
Yeah. So you're saying that you kind of began to share with this guy sort of, and the first time you were really vulnerable with someone.
Yeah, the first time I think I was genuine about it and telling someone the whole story. I was really good at telling like partial truths, so that, you know, I could remain
Plausible.
involved in the lie, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was the first time I really sat with someone and said, no, this is how it is. Like, fix me or tell me to go away. Just you make that decision, you know. So yeah, and I found myself moving in, and actually getting on really well with my support worker. And while I was, so I'd got all my stuff back from this guy's house, and was kind of going through stuff after I'd moved into the hostel, and essentially looking for things to sell, because I needed to make a benefit claim, but also I needed money now. You know, there's a service charge to pay. I smoked at the time, so I needed to get cigarettes and whatever. So I was looking through things and thinking, right, what can I sell? What's mine to sell? Rather than selling someone else's stuff, what's mine? Yeah, knock that on the head for a start. What's mine to sell? So I came across this old motorbike sat nav. We used to knock around on our little 125s. I found this little motorbike sat nav. I thought it's got to be worth a few quid. So I've popped into town, and it's one of the days that the Birmingham Rag Market was on. As I'm walking through the city centre on my way down to the Bowling Markets, I've heard like some Christian worship in the street, and it's a song that I recognised, and I just thought, oh, I'll stop and listen, you know, old time's sake and whatever. But I'm pretty sure God's done with me. Like, if there is a God, pretty sure he doesn't want anything to do with me now. So I stood quite a distance away, just kind of watching, and this guy came up to me and just put his arm on my shoulder and just asked me how I am. And man, I just burst into tears, like right in the middle of Birmingham city centre. Just broke down and just told this guy everything. I think, to be honest, I still talk to him quite a bit. And when I look back on that moment, I'm just like, man, I'm so sorry that I did that to you. Like, he was probably expecting me to be like, yeah, man, I'm fine. But yeah, so we had a really good chat. He introduced me to a couple of people and just said, look, man, come to church tomorrow. I was like, I don't know. I was really unsure, but essentially to shut him up, I was like, yeah, all right, I'll come. And walked away kind of thinking, yeah, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to entertain that. But then, long story short, the next morning, I woke up and found myself going to church. And as I walked through the door, this guy was just so happy to see me. Like we went upstairs into the auditorium and stuff, and sat through the service. And the one thing I remember from that service is the one thing that really kind of brought me back to Christ and made me, really make a proper wholehearted commitment to follow Christ. And that's halfway through the sermon. The minister just stopped. I can't even remember what he was talking about, but stopped what he was saying and just said, look, there's someone here who needs to hear this. It doesn't matter what you've done or how far away from God you think you are. It's one step back to him and he's waiting for you. And that was it. I was in pieces again. I was like, I thought I'd done all my crying when I was telling this guy about my story a couple of days ago when I moved into the hostel. I'm pretty sure there's no tears left. But I just broke down, and after the service kind of made a response to that, and went to the front and got a bit of prayer and accepted Christ into my heart. And that's the real kind of turning point for me. Obviously, not everything was fine straight away. I'm still living in a homeless service. I'm still on community service from the car thing. I've still got a lot of stuff going on. But somehow I knew it was going to be all right.
Yeah.
And I met up with these guys a few days later. We went for a KFC. We were sitting in KFC and they were like, right, we want to pray for you, but we don't just want to pray like this wishy-washy prayer. Like, we want to pray for something tangible. So what do you want? And everything was going through my head. I want the money back. I want a job. I want a relationship. But then I don't even know what it was that led me to say this. But in the hostel I was in, there's ensuite rooms and then some self-catered flats.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was you're in the service for at least 6 months before you're considered for one of these flats, and it's for people who can cook for themselves and that little bit more independence.
Yeah.
And I just said, I want one of these flats. That's a step for me that I really want. I don't want to be told when I'm eating. I don't want this and that. I just want one of these flats. And I went back to the hostel. So we prayed in the middle of KFC. I went back to this hostel, and within a couple of days, my support worker came to me and said, we've got a flat come up. Do you want it? And I was just like, this doesn't make sense. I've done all this stuff and I've let God down so much. And even when I've been completely faithless, he's still being faithful. That one step back to him and he's like, all right, here you go. I mentioned earlier that a lot of the time when I think about my story, I think about the story of the prodigal son.
Yeah.
And that to me is, so that Sunday when the pastor's like, it doesn't matter how far away you are from God, you're one step away. That's the father running through the field with his arms flailing and his snotty nose, and he's pulled his skirt up. He looked a mess.
Yeah.
But then that offer of the flat to me is right, let's throw a party, kill the fattest calf. This is my proof that I love you. This is my proof that I accept you. I know that might be a bonkers way of thinking.
No, that sounds right to me. And was kind of like, just to sort of go back a bit, so were you still struggling with the sort of with drugs or anything at this point? Okay. When was that sort of?
So I knocked the drugs on the head when I left the pub. Okay. So that was the point where it was like, right, cocaine, I'm done with coke.
And then
gambling was still a big issue at this point. So I couldn't walk past the bookies or a casino without just being pulled in. Thankfully, I couldn't afford a smartphone at the time, so I didn't have gambling apps on my phone. But I really struggled to walk past a casino or a bookies without going in. But that was about to change. So I've been there probably a couple of months. So I got there in September, and then November, got myself a job, and so I finished all my community service and stuff, and started this part-time job. And that's the year HMV went into administration, so they weren't able to keep me on. But that kind of got me the taster for being back in work, you know, for having a reason to wake up in the morning. And I started looking for work in retail, just something nice and easy. And I found a job at a clothes retailer in the Bullring, which, you know, people who know me wouldn't really put me down as someone working in fashion at all. But it was fun while it lasted. But I've been there about a week or so, and I got a letter through the post to the hostel, and I picked it up on the way out of the building on the way into work. And this letter just said, basically it's a warrant for my arrest for unpaid court fines, going back to the car incident. So
Right.
£334 in unpaid court fines, and basically the police are going to come get you. So I spoke to my gaffer at work, and he ended up putting me on paid suspension while it was sorted, because I just didn't want police rocking up at work and nicking around for stuff. So I said, right, pay your fine. You get paid in a couple of weeks, so pay your fine, show us the receipt, and you can come back to work. So I contacted someone from church and said, look, this is a situation I'm in, I don't know what to do. So we met up and went for a coffee and talked it through. He got in touch with someone else in church who was a copper, and his copper said, look, take yourself to the police station, go in the morning, because if you go tonight, you're gonna be nicked tonight, you spend another night in the cell. Go in the morning before like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. You'll still be nicked, you'll still be put in a cell, but then you'll be taken to court the same day. Just save yourself having the night in the cell. So I woke up the next morning, took myself to the police station, put a shirt and tie on, took this letter with me, rocked up at Stairhouse Lane in Birmingham, and was like, right, I'm here, like, do what you need to do. And the officer behind the desk kind of looked at me, a little bit shocked that someone's just walking in, and typed away on his computer, looked at me again, typed back on his computer. He was like, look, there's nothing here to tell me that I can arrest you. And until it comes up on our system, legally, we can't nick you. But this letter has obviously come from the court, so it will reach us at some point. The best I can do is advise you to pay the fine. So I walked out, went back to the hostel, went back to bed, and then in a bit more of a reasonable time, phoned this guy from church and said, look, this is what's happened. I don't know what to do, but they're not nicking me. And he said, look, I've had my student loan come through today, so I'll pay your fine off for you. You owe me the money, like, you know, it wasn't a gift. But he said, I know you get paid in a couple of weeks, so pay it back when you can. So we did. We met up, he gave me the cash, we went straight to the court, paid the fine off, all done, took the receipt to work, he came with me, showed it to the gaffer, and the gaffer was like, right, you're back at work tomorrow, happy days. And it was all done and dusted. But then, so when I went home, back to the hostel, picked up the post again, and in the post, there's a cheque for a tax rebate for £334.
Wow.
And I was just like, even now, like thinking about it, it just blows my mind every time. So obviously, you know, I could cash that, and within a couple of days, gave this guy his money back. And yeah, it's just bonkers, man. So yeah, that was pretty much that, really. That was me kind of really set on, okay, I'm going to make this work, man. I'm really going to work hard at this time.
I think it sounds like, Will, like you found what true repentance was. It was almost like you had to come to the end of yourself before you could kind of really kind of reach that point where you would be honest and open enough to allow people into the situation and allow God to really break into your life.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you know, I think I just reached the point where I had nothing else to lose. So what's the point in keeping up a story when there's no one to tell it to? Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting journey that. But then, I still lived in the hostel for a long time after that. I was still there for another 9 months or so after that, working for most of that. So I found myself working at a coffee shop, working full time, worked my way up into management in the coffee shop, spent a good few years there, built some really solid relationships there. And the whole time staying connected with church, I made a really good group of friends in the church who knew my situation, knew what was going on. When there was social stuff going on, if I couldn't afford it, it was fine for me to say I can't afford that, and there was no, flipping out, man, you can never afford anything.
So you never felt any kind of pressure to sort of get money from somewhere to join in. Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, if it was stuff that people knew I'd really want to do, or say I hadn't been out for a few weeks after church on a Sunday, people would be like, "Do you want me to pay for you?" Like, I'm happy to pay for you. I can do that. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't. But there was, like I say, there's just no pressure around that at all, which was really good, man. And there was times where we'd go to the pub together and do a pub quiz, and I had no money, so I'd just drink tap water, and a couple of other people would just drink tap water as well, just to be like, look, it's okay to not have money, So yeah, that was a real kind of learning curve for me, I think.
So what would you say kind of like your relationship with God was like at this point, and sort of in comparison to how it was sort of when you were younger, and where you kind of were going to church, but maybe, as you say, you were a lot of it was a facade. Like how did it feel different to you?
It was more of a desire this time around. So, more of a want to pray rather than, I should probably pray. I haven't done that for a week or so. More of a things just becoming a daily routine. So not like a religious routine, but wake up in the morning and first thought is, thank you for today, God. And then just kind of keeping in conversation with God throughout the day. It's always on my mind. I want to listen to podcasts about faith. I want to get stuck into the Word. I want to learn. I want to grow. Whereas previously it was more, I want to look like I'm doing all those things, but actually I don't really want to do them. So yeah, I think the main difference really was desire and wanting to really know God, rather than just understand God. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Instead of up here, you wanted it in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest difference. And there was still stuff to work through. Like the gambling was a big one. And I remember one specific night where I was playing table tennis in the hostel, and I had some money in my pocket, and I just had this overwhelming urge to go and gamble. And I didn't even care if I lost all the money. I just wanted to gamble. So I just went and spoke to the staff at reception and was like, look, I've got this money. Can I give it to you? Just keep hold of it, put it somewhere. Don't let me have it tonight. And they did, put it in an envelope, popped it in the safe. And that was that really for gambling. So the next morning I've woke up and I'm like, I can beat this. I can do this. Whilst that's a sensible decision I made, I think it was inspired by the Holy Spirit to be like, look, you can do this. Just trust me. Follow the instinct that I give you rather than trying to do things on your own, and you can beat it.
Yeah.
So the next morning I've woke up and I'm like, right, I can do this. So I found the casinos that I'm a member of, and blacklisted myself. And one of them invited me in for a conversation with the manager, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. I don't really want to walk through your doors. And they're like, no, come in, because it's flagged up on, if you try and sign in, it's flagged up on your membership now that we're not going to let you in. But the manager wants to have a chat with you. And actually, they were really helpful. You know, I can't thank the guy enough. He tried to put me in touch with, he gave me information about loads of like gambling help agencies and gambling helpline and stuff. And actually, it was a really good conversation. And he said to me, look, if you want to come back, that's fine. We'll have you back, but you need to give us a few months' notice. Like, it's in their policies that, you know, you have to give them, like, I think it's 3 or 6 months' notice, so that they can make sure it's a decision you definitely want to make. Yeah, I just thought from then, that's it, man. I beat gambling. I haven't. It's still a daily struggle sometimes. Yeah, I haven't gambled since then. But I don't think I'm naive enough now to say, right, I have beat it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fight every day. It's just that I'm winning at the moment.
Yeah.
And I believe wholeheartedly that I'll continue to win. But what I mean is every day I have to trust God for that.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, more recently things have started to reopen under COVID. So I'm walking past bookies now and they're open and they've got all the odds in the windows and stuff. And that distracts me while I'm walking, you know, and I have to just think, right, come on, God, you can help me here. You know, and sometimes
that choice.
Sometimes that means I cross the road. Other times it means I can walk straight past. But, you know, all glory to God that I haven't stepped foot in a bookies or a casino or downloaded a betting app or anything since.
So what's happened since then? So you going to church, you've got a job, you've got your own little flat, self-contained flat. God's helping you with gambling. You kind of, you know, everything's kind of going steady. So what happened since then?
So I ended up moving out of the hostel. So I moved into a Christian house share. Someone put me in touch with one of their friends. Moved into a Christian house share. Just really started kind of working towards that bit more independence. Unfortunately, the Christian house share didn't work out as planned. But then ended up living with the friend that I was working with. Just it's difficult to explain the first few years because it was just
it's a lot
kind of plodding on for a little bit, to be honest with you, for a couple of years. So I was living with this guy, a lad that I worked with in the coffee shop, and we were really, really good friends. It wasn't a Christian guy, but we were just really good mates. And then so I met my now wife through church. Kind of got to know her brother first, and then got talking to my wife. And at first I was like, nah, she ain't gonna be interested in me, and kind of just thought nothing of it and left her alone a little bit, really. But obviously it worked out. So we started talking. We started talking, and and that relationship really started to grow into a really positive, you know, healthy relationship. And then, so I moved in with a guy from church then, so we got a flat together in Jory Quarter. Then I just reached the point where I thought, right, you know, I spent a few years working with coffee. I'd gone into working with an independent shop, and then was spending a bit of time kind of traveling around Europe a few times, but mainly in the UK. There was a few trips kind of out into wider Europe, working at like corporate events and stuff for a friend's company. And I just reached the point where I was like, I want to give something back. You know, coffee's great, and I'm passionate about good coffee. You know, not just high street chain, but like proper coffee. But I want to give something back. I want to work with homeless people. I want to go back to where I've been and pull people out of where I've been. So I started applying for jobs, working in homeless services. And in fact, it was the first interview I had, was offered the job. And that in itself was a bit of a journey. So I was working in an independent coffee shop. I was managing a new branch. So we had 2 branches. So I was managing the new branch, and found myself really kind of fed up with what I was doing. So I'd use 3 or 4 hours out of my day. I'd be on the phone to people, sometimes even while I'm serving customers. And I'd applied for this job working in homeless services and just thought, why am I not hearing anything back from these guys, man? Like they'd tell me either way. And then so I was in a band at the time, and we were playing in Malvern, actually, not too far from where I live now. And I was in the only space in the whole of this site where I've got any signal. And my phone rang, and it was this company saying, we've wrote to you and offered you the job, but you haven't accepted. I'm just wondering what's going on. And it turned out they had the wrong postcode and hadn't actually written a letter to me at all. So yeah, but prior to that happening, God really challenged me about my work, my attitude at work. It was like, right, you need to fix your attitude. Work as if you're working for me, and then I'll give you your next step. Do you know what I mean? So I did that and then got this phone call. And that's how I started working in homeless services. And stayed with the same organisation for quite a while. Got married in that time, had our first child in that time. And then went on a bit of a rough journey. When would it have been? Early 2019. So everything was actually going really well. I was building a good career. I'd got quite a good reputation in the city, in homeless services, not just for myself, but for the organisation I was working for as well. And everything was going really well. And I won't go into details, but someone at work accused me of something that I hadn't done. And that was a really rough, it lasted just over a month in total. That was a really rough month. I was off work for that month, under investigation for this thing. And then even when it turned out I hadn't done it, or rather, I think it was phrased as no evidence, but I was allowed to come back to work. People just treated me differently. People who would previously greet me with open arms were like scoffing at me in corridors and stuff. And I was like, this just ain't right, man. So I stuck it out for a little bit. Thought, I could get really petty and start putting in counter grievances and, make it really messy. But I just thought, no, I'll stick it out for a bit, and just quietly look for something else. And then the job came up managing the service that I'd lived in, or rather, being on the management team, kind of team leading the service that I'd lived in. So I applied for that, and got it. And absolutely buzzing, man. So I've been there since August 2019. So I settled into my new role, and then COVID hit. And, so I spent the majority of my time there figuring out how to lead a homeless service through a global pandemic. But like I said earlier, not doing things in my own strength anymore, relying on God for that wisdom. How do I deal with a building of 74 people and a staff team of 30, 40 other people with social distancing, and trying to be aware of someone might need to isolate at some point.
I think what's beautiful though, Will, about that is kind of it's just so God, isn't it, to kind of to take someone who's sort of was living in a really difficult situation, addicted to gambling, drugs, with struggling with stealing and all sorts of things, turn their life around, restore them, and then use them to minister to the same kind of people. I just think that is really beautiful, and that's what God can do, and that's what God does do.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I mean, I often find myself thinking, who am I to do this? But then I just think, who am I to question him?
Yeah.
It's like in Job, where were you when I created the world? Do you not think I can figure out the little intricate things when I did all of this?
So I guess if there's one thing maybe you could say to someone who, I don't know, there's a variety of things really. Like, maybe there's someone who has been to church their whole life, but actually they're just, they just want to look good, and they're not really living authentically for Christ. What would you say to them? Or somebody that's maybe got a gambling addiction and they don't know where to turn, or they can't stop what they're doing. What would you say?
Okay, so there's two very different things there.
Yeah.
So the first one, I'd say in love, but it'd be tough love, and that would be make a decision. Make your mind up, live how you want to live, but make your mind up about how you want to do that. And obviously, I'd love for that to be following Christ and living all out for Him. But the Bible says, doesn't it, that it's much better to either be hot or cold than it is to be lukewarm. Yeah. So my advice there would be make your mind up, because there's nothing worse than not even knowing what you're doing with your own life. In terms of the gambling addiction and what was it, not knowing where to turn?
Yeah.
I think it's something that actually I find myself dealing with quite a lot at work. Not necessarily just gambling. That's quite a bespoke addiction, I think. Yeah. Less talked about addiction. And something that I'm quite passionate about and want to start influencing change, but don't really know how to do that. But in terms of addiction, there's help out there. It's about taking that step, but you need to be ready first. You've got to want to quit. It's one thing to say I want to quit, and it's another thing to actually want to quit. And you need to be ready. And being ready is different stages. Do you need to be ready to want to? If you want to, okay, have you thought through the consequences of not doing that? That might mean you take a longer walk home, or it might mean you stop drinking, for instance. If drinking is not an issue for you, but you gamble when you're drunk, or there's something else that's leading to this behaviour. And then you need to look at the reason why you're doing that addictive behaviour, whatever that addictive behaviour is. Well, what is it that triggers that in you? And even deeper, what is it that kind of sparks that in you in the first place? What's happened in your life that you can look back and think, that's the point when I thought this would be a good idea, or that's the point when I thought this was fun. Then you can acknowledge that's the point when it stopped being fun. And acknowledge feelings as well. There's so much to do with addiction, and it's such a personal thing. Because everyone's got their own reason for addiction. Everyone's got their own backstory. Everyone's got their own hook, really. Two heroin users will use for very different reasons and will get very different highs. But I think one of the things with gambling, but one of the things with any addiction, is you're always chasing that first high. And you'll never get it. With drugs, you'll never get that first high again. You'll never get that feeling. With gambling, you'll never get that thrill again of, I might win on my first go. You never win with gambling. It's it's a fool's game. And if it's someone who's got a faith in Christ, I'd remind them, it's a lesson I've had to learn a very difficult, hard way. But I'd remind them, we need to be honouring God with our finances. you know, that can go as far as someone who gambles. That can be someone who has a shopping addiction. You know,
Yeah.
any kind of addiction. I'd say want to quit first, and then crack on and do it. And how you crack on and do it is obviously different for each person. But get support around you. You know, make yourself accountable to someone. You know, whether that's a parent or a spouse or a friend or a minister. You know, have someone that you're accountable to. Is probably one of the biggest things, actually. Someone who's going to ask those awkward questions and say, you know, have you gambled in the last week, or, you know, have you had a drink today? You know, someone who's not scared to ask the awkward questions.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Excellent.
Well, listen, mate, I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story, and obviously from a personal perspective, and not really speaking to you for quite a long time. It's just a blessing to my heart, really, to see, you know, to see where you were and where you are now. It really is, and it's amazing just what God's done, you know, and how he's just changed you. And I'm just really grateful that he did that. And
he's got a habit of doing that for people.
He's got a habit of doing that, but it's really amazing. So thank you.
No, thank you, mate. It's been really good to catch up.